expand our talk on selections using the different selection tools. So the first one we're going to use now is actually the rectangular marquee tool. That's called the rectangular marquee tool. Alright, now preferably whenever I do something on my document, I create a new layer every time. So for every new stuff that I'm going to do on my page or on my image, I create a new layer. That way I can turn it on and off as I like. Now there's the rectangle, right? That's a rectangular marquee, rectangular selection. Marquee stands for this moving dashed line, which tells you that why is it moving? It's moving because it's not going to be printed. It's there for you to know that it's actually a selection or a marquee. Now, one thing that's very important is that if you click outside, you remove the selection. So in case you had the selection and you clicked outside by default, you remove the selection. It's like going to select and deselect or pressing Ctrl D. This is what happens by default. In cases you wanted to move the selection and not remove it or delete it, you click inside the selection and you move it around. Right? If you remember when we worked with the duck, which is found in samples and ducky. Now whenever we made the selection for the ducky by using the magic wand tool and clicking and then choosing select inverse. Now some of you were actually trying to move the ducky or the duck by just going like this. When you do that, you're actually moving the selection and not moving the actual pixels. So Control D. So the lesson to learn is that when you are in the selection tool like the magic wand or the rectangular or any of these tools or any of these lasso tools, whenever you try to move from within, you are actually moving the selection and not the pixels within the selection. So you would go to move and you go like that and then it moves like this. So that's why some of you are having problems with this. So remember that whenever you click outside the selection, you remove it, undo, Control Z. Whenever you click within the selection, you move the selection. Yeah, I selected the white color with the magic wand and then I chose select and inverse. Or Control Shift I. From now on, I'm going to use Control Shift I because it's much faster than going to select and inverse. Or right click and select inverse. Now I like to use shortcuts a lot because they speed up the work. So also take the habit of doing this. Control D to remove the selection. Click Control Shift I. Now to move, you go to the move tool. The shortcut is V. So V, you go directly to the move tool and then you can drag and drop this over there. Alright, so now back to the blank page. There's a selection. Move it around. Now it's on a new layer, of course. What I want to do is add to the selection because if I try to create another rectangle like this, the other one disappears. So what I want to do is add to my selection. To add to your selection, you press Shift and now you go like this, for example. Okay, that's my selection now. I was pressing Shift all the time. If I wanted to remove something from my selection, while selecting, if I wanted to remove something from my selection, I press Alt. And now, you see I'm holding Alt on my keyboard and deselecting like this. This is very important and very fast actually when you're working with selections. So now, there's my selection. What I want to do now with the selection is fill it with a color. How can I fill it with a color? It's very easy. You can either paint with the inside, but that's really bad because it will take you a long time. Although if you wanted to have an artistic effect, you can actually paint within like this, because that would give you something nice and artistic. And to remove the selection, Control D. So this is what I have now on my layer, but this is not what I want to do. So Control Alt Z, and Control Alt Z, remember, is edit and step backwards. So in case you wanted to go back more than one step, we talked about the history before, it's not edit undo, because undo would have one step back and then redo. So Control Z will give you undo redo all the time. But Control Alt Z will go back in history. By default, you have 20 steps in history. We saw how to actually increase that. I increased it up to 50 myself. Control Shift Z will make you go forward in history. So it's the opposite. So you can replay what you did. But let's go back. In case you forget the shortcuts Control Alt Z and Control Shift Z, you can go to Edit, Step Forward and Step Backward. So there it is. Now, to actually fill this up in one go, I would use something called the paint bucket. So I have to click here where it says the gradient tool, and you go down to the paint bucket tool. So once you're there, you select the color and you fill, and there it fills the whole selection. So Control D to remove the selection now. Now, I'll delete this layer by dragging it down to the recycle.